I'm Taylor, 32, and for years I worked myself to exhaustion so my family could keep a roof over their heads. I thought paying off the mortgage would finally make us whole, that the house we lived in would stand as proof of everything I had sacrificed for them. But the day I made the last payment, they shoved my bags at me, sneering that the house was never mine, their laughter following me out the door like knives. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I walked away in silence. A week later, the bank showed up with the deed carrying my name. Their laughter died instantly, replaced with fear as I returned with the keys in my hand. The house they claimed as theirs was never theirs to begin with. What followed wasn't just revenge. It was the moment my silence became the loudest truth they had ever heard, and it left them with nothing but the echo of their own betrayal. The laughter didn't stop when I closed the door behind me. It lingered, muffled through the wood, sharp and mocking, like a victory cry from people who believed they had won. My suitcase wheels rattled against the front steps, one snagging on a crack in the concrete I had patched myself 2 summers ago. I didn't pause. I didn't turn around. If they wanted me gone, they would have their wish. The sky that evening was heavy, dark clouds rolling in over the neighborhood. It matched the weight pressing down on my chest. I had spent years building that roof above us, brick by brick, payment by payment, convincing myself that sacrifice was love and love would eventually be returned. The double shifts, the hours of aching feet, the skipped dinners, those were just stepping stones to a shared future. Or so I thought. Inside that house, I had imagined warmth. Holidays around the dining table, nights spent knowing the walls sheltered us because I had fought for them. Instead, they had shoved my bags into my hands and smirked as if I had been foolish for believing I belonged. My mother's voice had been the sharpest. This house was never yours. Don't get it twisted. My brother's chuckle had followed, like salt in an open wound. My father didn't even bother to look at me. I walked down the driveway with their voices echoing behind me. No argument left my lips, no explanation. What was there to say? Gratitude had died long ago, replaced with entitlement. The more I gave, the more they expected, until the moment the final mortgage slip was paid. That should have been the turning point, the moment I thought I had finally secured stability for all of us. Instead, it was the trigger for my eviction. The neighborhood lights flickered on as I reached the street. People's homes glowed with life, families inside laughing, eating, existing without fractures tearing them apart. I dragged my suitcase toward the bus stop, my face calm though my hands trembled around the handle. The night air bit at my skin, but I didn't shiver. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction, even from afar. I rented a small room at the edge of town. One bed, one window, one bathroom barely wide enough to turn in. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was mine. For the first time, I could close a door and know that behind it there would be no ridicule, no demands, no backhanded comments about how much more I could be doing. Silence filled the room, a silence that soothed rather than stung. Still, their laughter haunted me in the quiet. It replayed at night, the sound of their delight in casting me out. They had treated my sacrifice as a foolish mistake, proof of how naive I had been to think I would ever matter more than the roof itself. But that was where they had miscalculated. They thought the house was theirs, simply because they had lived in it. They forgot whose name was printed on every piece of paper that mattered. A week passed in that rented room. I went to work, came back, lived without interruption. On the 7th day, the phone buzzed. A voice, professional and clipped, asked me if I would be available to meet at my former address. They were sending representatives, they said. There had been confusion about ownership, and it was time to clear it. Confusion. That was their word. To me, it wasn't confusion. It was betrayal wrapped in arrogance. But I agreed. Quietly. Calmly. No need to rush what was already inevitable. That afternoon, the sky had cleared, bright and sharp, as though the world itself wanted every detail to be seen. I arrived just as the officials stepped out of their car, stacks of documents tucked into neat folders. My family stood on the porch, faces expectant, certain this was some clerical issue that would be resolved in their favor. My mother had her arms crossed, my father leaned against the railing, and my brother smirked the same smirk that had followed me out the door days before. The officer cleared his throat, papers in hand. We're here regarding the ownership of this property. According to our records, the deed is not in your names. It is, in fact, under hers. He gestured toward me. The words landed like thunder. Silence. Not the kind that fills a pause, but the kind that freezes everything. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, as though her breath had been stolen. My father straightened, his weight shifting uneasily. My brother's smirk faltered, slipping from his face like a mask melting under heat. I stepped forward, keys dangling from my hand. The metallic clink carried across the yard, sharp as a bell toll. You wanted me gone? I said, my voice steady, calm, almost gentle. Congratulations. Now it's your turn. The morning after the papers were served, the silence in that house must have been unbearable for them. I didn't step inside yet, though I had every right. Instead, I stood across the street, leaning against the hood of my car, watching the blinds twitch as they peeked out. My mother's face appeared first, pale and tight, her mouth moving quickly as she spoke to someone inside. Then my brother's shadow loomed behind her. They were planning, no doubt scrambling for a way to twist this back into their favor. By afternoon, the phone calls started. First my father, his voice unusually even, asking me to come talk. He said the papers must have been a mistake, that the deed being in my name was some banking error. When I told him I had the original documents signed and notarized, the line went dead. Hours later, my mother called, her tone sharper, accusing me of stealing what was rightfully theirs. She forgot that every check I wrote, every bill I paid, every receipt I kept had my signature on it. I didn't argue. I let them speak, let their voices reveal how desperate they were becoming. My brother tried a different approach that night. He showed up at the small place I was renting, pounding on the door until I opened it. He leaned against the frame, all false charm and forced laughter, pretending as if throwing me out had been a misunderstanding. He said they hadn't meant it, that things had gotten heated. His words slid off me like oil. When I told him he had 30 seconds to leave, or I would call the police, the grin disappeared. His eyes hardened. You think you're going to live in that house alone? He said. We'll see about that. And with that, he stormed off. The next few days became a parade of attempts. They called relatives, spreading stories about how ungrateful I was, painting me as the villain who had betrayed them. Distant cousins sent me messages, repeating half-truths they had been fed, warning me I was tearing the family apart. I saved every one of those messages. Evidence, should I need it. Then came the legal maneuver. They hired a lawyer, claiming the house was theirs through family rights. I sat in the courtroom with my folder of documents, quiet as their attorney spun a narrative about tradition, blood ties, and implied inheritance. When it was my turn, I handed the judge every record, proof of payment, bank statements, copies of the deed. The judge looked at them, looked at me, then at my parents seated on the opposite side. Ownership is clear, the judge said. This property belongs solely to her. Case dismissed. My family's faces hardened, their eyes avoiding mine. As I walked out of the courtroom, I didn't smile, didn't celebrate. I just carried my papers in silence, letting the weight of the truth do the work. But defeat didn't stop them. That evening, I returned to the neighborhood and found my brother sitting on the porch steps, arms folded. He didn't move as I approached, keys in my hand. You're not kicking us out, he said flatly. We've lived here our whole lives. You're not going to put your own family on the street. I stood over him, the keys dangling. You already did that to me, I said. A week ago, remember? His jaw clenched. For the first time, I saw the fear beneath his bravado. He had believed all along that I was soft, that I would bend to guilt, that I couldn't stand alone. But the law wasn't on their side anymore. Neither was I. Inside, I could hear my mother's voice rising, sharp and shrill, calling me selfish, heartless, ungrateful. My father's tone followed, quieter but colder, accusing me of dishonoring them. Every word only solidified the truth. They weren't begging to stay because they loved me. They were begging because they couldn't imagine life without the security I had built. Over the following days, I returned with movers. The officers who had delivered the documents stood by, ensuring there would be no confrontation. Furniture was carried out, clothes packed into boxes, belongings lined up along the driveway. My mother stood on the porch, her eyes burning into me. My father refused to come outside, while my brother paced like a caged animal. "You'll regret this." My mother spat as the last box was set down. "No one will stand by you after this. You'll be alone." Her words might have stung once, but standing there, watching everything they had claimed as theirs stripped away piece by piece, I felt nothing. They had made sure of that when they shoved me out with my suitcase and laughed. That night, I unlocked the front door of the house. My house. The air inside smelled stale, the remnants of meals I hadn't been invited to share still lingering. The rooms were quiet, stripped bare of the false warmth I had once believed in. I walked through each hallway, running my hand along the walls I had paid for, the floors I had polished, the roof I had secured. This time, I wasn't leaving. The neighbors whispered. Some avoided me, too afraid to take sides. Others offered cautious smiles, relief evident in their eyes. They had seen the way my family treated me, though none had said anything. Now, they watched the balance shift, their curiosity mingling with respect. But my family wasn't finished. That much was clear. The next week, letters appeared in my mailbox, anonymous but unmistakably theirs. Notes accusing me of betrayal, of tearing apart the foundation of our bloodline. One night, I found my trash cans overturned, garbage scattered across the yard. Another morning, my tires had been slashed. Small acts, meant to intimidate, to remind me they were still near. I documented everything. Photos, timestamps, reports filed quietly with the police. I wasn't going to give them the reaction they craved. No yelling, no tears. Only silence and preparation. The night it came to a head, I knew before it began. The air outside was too still, the silence heavier than usual, the kind of quiet that waits for something to break it. I sat at the dining table, the one I had once dreamed of filling with family dinners, and listened. Every creak of the floorboards above, every shifting shadow outside the window, told me they were not finished. It started with the back door. A faint click, the lock turning, though I had changed it only days before. I rose, phone in hand, ready. By the time my brother stepped inside, his shoes scraping against the tile, I was already dialing. His face froze when he saw me standing there, calm and waiting. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He tried a grin, the same hollow mask he had worn the night he showed up at my rental. "We just want to talk. You don't really think you can keep us out of this house forever, do you?" Behind him, my mother appeared, her eyes darting around the room, landing on the framed deed resting on the counter. My father followed, slower, his jaw tight. They had come together, united not by love, but by desperation. "This is still our home," my mother said, her voice trembling with rage. "You can't erase us from it." I didn't answer. The flashing lights outside answered for me. Within minutes, officers entered, their presence filling the space like a wall. My brother's bravado shattered as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. My mother shouted, her words spilling in a rush, but none of it mattered. My father lowered his head, saying nothing as he was escorted out. I stood in the doorway, watching them carried away from the house they had claimed as theirs. Their voices faded, swallowed by the night, until the silence returned. This time it wasn't heavy. It was clean. In the weeks that followed, the consequences unfolded. Restraining orders kept them away, their attempts to contact me cut off by law. The sabotage stopped. No more slashed tires, no more scattered trash, no more notes filled with venom. The house stood untouched, quiet at last. Neighbors stopped whispering and began knocking. Some offered apologies for their silence during the years I carried the burden. Others brought small gifts, gestures of respect for what I had endured. I accepted each with a nod, never explaining, never reopening the wound. The story didn't need retelling. The ending spoke for itself. Inside, I rebuilt. Not just the rooms, but the meaning of them. The dining table no longer sat empty. Friends filled the chairs, laughter replacing the echoes of betrayal. The walls, once soaked with bitterness, held warmth again. But I never forgot. I couldn't. Their laughter the night they threw me out had been the sound of people convinced I had no power, no claim, no worth. The silence that followed their removal was the proof of how wrong they had been. The house remained mine, not just in name, not just on paper, but in truth. I had walked away quietly when they thought they had won. That was the difference between us. They had relied on arrogance and lies. I had relied on patience and fact.